Hey, everybody. Welcome. So glad to have you here with us tonight. Should be yet another great late night stream. I'm here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment. A couple days, I'll be heading out of town again. But right now, I'm here. It's Saturday night in my lovely Brooklyn apartment, and we are going to have a lovely late night conversation. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Yeah, let's do it.
The American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just it's a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. So glad to have you here with us. It looks like we're having some technical difficulties with the Rumble. Oh, but now it seems to be working, right? Very interesting. The Rumble maybe wasn't working a minute ago, but now it is working. Maybe I don't know. Right? For a minute ago, it was telling me we were having trouble with the Rumble, but maybe now it's working. I don't know. Anyhow, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. I'm going to see if I can fix this with the Rumble. If I can fix this somehow. Yeah, because we want to be live on all the platforms, right? We know that YouTube is suppressing us, but yeah, nope. No, it should be working. But let me, okay, maybe the time is wrong. Maybe that's the issue. Right? No, apply. Okay. Your changes have been saved. Okay. All right. So we should be live right now, right? Or no? Interesting. Well, maybe the Rumble will start working at some point and maybe it won't. I don't know what's going on, but hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We're just doing another one of our Saturday night late night conversations. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. The way we do this, just a quick reminder for everybody who may not be familiar. I give my opening remarks, whatever it is I want to talk about on the stream. And then from there, we do the roll call where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. And then after that, I answer people's super chat questions for the rest of the night. So if you got a question you want to ask me, send me a Rockfin tip, send me a super chat here, and I will answer it in the second half of our program. That's the way we do it. Quick reminder for those of you who may still not be aware, I've been talking about it nonstop. Portland, December 2nd, National Convention of the Center for Political Innovation. It's going to be amazing. I'll probably talk about that later in the stream. Just wanted you to all remind you all about that very, very, very quickly. So Portland, December 2nd, links are down below. All right. So I guess I will just get into what it is that I was going to talk with you all about tonight. There's two things I wanted to talk to you all about tonight. Two historical periods, two historical moments that I thought were worth highlighting. Because not all, one of them is a very widespread global situation, and one of them is a very specific individual event in a particular country. But I think that they both are worth discussing. And shout out to Lee Lee Stranahan, who's in the chat. Yeah, just wanted to kind of give you a quick reminder of how some events happen. I think many people that are watching this may be familiar with these events, especially the first round of events I'm going to discuss, maybe not so much the second one, but it's important to talk about these things. If you go back to the Korean War, at the time of the Korean War, the global communist movement was pretty solidly unified. The Soviet Union had just defeated the Nazis in World War II, and many countries throughout Eastern Europe were building socialism. China had just had its revolution in 1949. And on the Korean Peninsula, there was a government, the People's Democratic Republic of Korea, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. And the United States had been on the winning side of World War II as well, and Britain had been on the winning side as well. But everybody knew that the United States and Britain had let fascism grow. In Spain, they had done everything they could to prevent solidarity with the Spanish Republic, even though the Soviet Union and Mexico both came to the aid of the Spanish Republic against Franco. The British and the Americans had passed laws like the Neutrality Act, tried to suppress any solidarity. There had been a huge effort to appease Hitler and allow him to expand eastward because they wanted him to fight the Soviet Union. Harry Truman had said that if it looked like Hitler was going to win, the United States should back Stalin. And if it looked like Stalin was going to win, they should back Hitler. And the point was to weaken both of the two countries so America could remain dominant. That's what Harry Truman, who became the U.S. president, had actually said on the floor of Congress. I'm not exaggerating. That actually was his position. And after World War II, the communists were in a really good position, and they were winning elections in Italy. They were winning elections in France. African countries were moving towards socialism. You know, the rise of Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana. You had the beginnings of the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa, and all over the colonized world, many people were looking to the communists for leadership. Indonesia started moving toward communism in these years. You had a communist government that was emerging and taking power in Indonesia. And the post-World War II years, the global communist movement was united. You had a situation where there were two governments on the Korean Peninsula, the Democratic People's Republic in the north and the Republic of Korea in the south. What happened? Well, originally, there was supposed to be a unified government. However, in the South, Syngman Rhee became the military dictator and canceled the elections and outlawed the Communist Party. And so the people on Jeju Island who wanted to have a right to participate in the elections, wanted the right to have communists run in elections, they rose up against Syngman Rhee, and so they were brutally massacred. And with the oversight of the United States, there was a brutal massacre on the island of Jeju. There was heavy repression of various Koreans who had heroically fought the Japanese under the leadership of the communists. And so under those circumstances, North Korea said, okay, we're going to go rescue our country folk in the South. We're not going to tolerate this government, on the southern half of our country that has Japanese collaborators in it. It's not clear who fired the first shot. Regardless, North Korea, moved its forces to try and reunify their homeland. Of course, the United States then intervened and sent its forces into South Korea, where they just started slaughtering civilians. There was mass slaughter of civilians, etc. And they started driving the communist forces up into the north, almost all the way to the Chinese border. And at that point, Mao Zedong and the Chinese communists said, oh, no, you won't. If you're able to retake North Korea, they'll come into China. And so the Chinese People's Liberation Army went into North Korea to back up North Korea and drove the United States back to the 38th parallel. The general in the U.S. military, Douglas MacArthur, threatened to drop 4 or 5 atomic bombs on China if they sent their forces into North Korea. And China said, we don't care, we dare you. They called their bluff. And at that moment, President Truman fired Douglas MacArthur because he threatened to use the atomic bomb without the permission of the elected government. So Douglas MacArthur was fired. It wasn't a shameful firing. After he was fired, he was brought back to the U.S. Congress to give a speech to the joint session of Congress. He was honored and honored by conservatives and Republicans, but he had his disagreement with Truman. The Korean people delivered the biggest epic defeat to the United States that has ever been, had yet ever been delivered. The United States had never been defeated that badly in a war. Mao and Kim Il-sung had driven the United States right back to where they started. At the 38th parallel, there was an armistice, and the USA was supposed to follow up and sign a peace treaty with North Korea, but they never did. North Korea was established. The 1950s in the United States, people remember that as a bad time. In the United States, you had McCarthyism that was going on. You had the witch hunts. You had Jim Crow segregation that was still in effect, et cetera. But globally, the 1950s globally were a moment when the global communist movement was at its height. And in Europe, that's when, governments like, the British government created their national healthcare service and started giving everyone free healthcare. That's when the labor unions all across the Western world were at the height of their strength. And communism as a movement was wildly popular everywhere except the United States. People compare what happened in the United States with McCarthyism. It's actually very similar to what happened with the Spanish Inquisition. Right? While the rest of Europe was having the Protestant Reformation, and the Catholic Church was losing ground everywhere, and et cetera. In Spain, where the Catholic Church had a stronghold, they had a wild, insane crackdown on any potential dissidents because this was their one place that they had the power. Well, in the 50s, McCarthyism was the same way. All over the world, communism was gaining ground. However, in the one country, the United States, where communism didn't have a strong foothold, where it had been somewhat weak, there was an insane crackdown. And all the remnants of the Roosevelt administration were snuffed out. They threw Alger Hiss in prison on suspicion of being a communist. The Democratic Party purged the Roosevelt wing, and McCarthyism was in full swing because all over the world, communism was rising. And in the United States, communism had not been strong enough to be a real factor, and so they wanted to just stamp it out. You have to remember, you read books from this period. William Z. Foster, one of my greatest favorite writers, he wrote a book published in 1949. It's called The Twilight of World Capitalism, and I think I have a copy of it. Yeah, I do. I have a copy of it right up here. This is 1949, The Twilight of World Capitalism. I want to read you. I'll just show you. This is the dedication. The dedication right here. To my great-grandson, Joseph Manley Colco, who will live in a communist United States. The book is called The Twilight of World Capitalism. Coming out of World War II, it looked inevitable. The communists were winning. Right? The communists, they had raised the Soviet Union up into a modern country, wiped out illiteracy, industrialized the whole place, electrified the whole place, built modern universities. They were making some of the best films at the time with Sergei Eisenstein, and they invented space travel, and the Soviet Union was doing utterly amazing things. China had joined with the Soviet Union. They'd had a communist revolution. Eastern Europe had joined with the Soviet Union. North Korea had joined with the Soviet Union. And all over the third world, big, massive communist parties were being formed that were winning elections, that had seats in the government. And communism looked like it was winning. It had the upper hand. It's also worth noting that this time period, starting at the end of World War II, is also the greatest period of economic growth in the history of humanity. They call it the post-World War II economic expansion. From the end of World War II, from about late 40s, 47, 48, up until 1970, 71, 72, there has never been a period in human history with that much economic growth. People all over the world were rising up out of poverty. In the communist countries, they were getting running water for the first time in their lives. They were getting, health care. People in China saw a doctor for the first time in their lives. The first time anyone in that region had ever seen a doctor happened in this time, right? I mean, they were, and it happened in Egypt. Egypt had a communist leader, an anti-imperialist leader, Abdel Nasser, and he was building power plants and this time period, the 1950s up into the 60s, the post-World War II economic expansion, there has never been that much economic growth, right? That is the longest period of expanded economic growth in human history, and it was the biggest period. Millions and millions of people were being lifted out of poverty. People were getting health care. People were getting education. People were getting electricity. I mean, and it wasn't just in the communist countries. It was also in the capitalist countries, because in order to prevent communists from taking over, in various U.S.-aligned countries, military dictators would come in, and to stabilize society, to prevent the communist revolution, to stay in power, these military dictators would use the military to build power plants, to build schools, etc. Military strongmen like Park Chung-hee in South Korea, military strongmen like Marcos in the Philippines. These dictators, they were coming in order to hold off the communist revolution, they started building shit and they started giving people stuff. They would brutally repress the communists, and round them up and kill them. And they would be brutal usually to the people in the rural areas, but they would build up the cities and they would create an urban middle class to stabilize society. That was happening in the third world countries that were not communist. You had the rise of these Bonapartist military juntas that were anti-communist, that the USA allowed to industrialize their countries as a barrier against communism. Then, in the first world, in Britain, you had the rise of the National Health Service. After World War II, Britain nationalized almost everything. Railways, steel, electricity was all being nationalized and rebuilt at the taxpayer's expense. There was almost guaranteed employment. I mean, it was British imperialism, but in order to stabilize itself, it had to adopt social democratic measures like you wouldn't believe. France, expanded a huge welfare state. West Germany, all the capitalist countries they were having social democratic programs, providing people healthcare, providing people jobs, taxing the rich and giving social benefits to everybody like crazy. And even here in the United States, even though there was heavy anti-communism, this was the period where there was very, very heavy taxes on the rich people. This is the period where, welfare benefits to low-income people were far bigger than they are now. Single mothers, they didn't have to have a job, right? If back in those days, right, if you were a single mother and you had multiple children, the government was basically paying you. Now they got rid of that during the Clinton administration. Now it's very difficult for single mothers to get assistance. But back in those days, if you were a single mom, you had kids, the government just wrote you a check. Food stamps. I mean, there was a huge welfare state, even in the Western European countries, outside the United States, it was massive. In the United States, it didn't get to be as big, but it was significant. And this period of, the welfare states in the Western countries, the military juntas in the U.S.-aligned countries of the third world, and the great rapid industrialization in the Western or in the communist countries, this was the greatest period of economic growth in human history. The post-World War II economic expansion. And the Korean War happened, and the whole communist world, the Soviet Union, China, North Korea, Eastern European countries, they all kind of rallied around Kim Il-sung and kicked the United States and Syngman Rhee back into the southern half of the Korean Peninsula. It was quite massive what was going on. And it looked to anybody who knew anything, it looked like the communists were winning. And I'm not telling you this to be like, oh, those were the good old days. That's not my point here. I want to tell you how that was undone. And this is a really important point, because in light of the way things are going now, in the light of so much of what I see nowadays, we need to talk about how this was undone. The first blow, the first shot across the bow, the first major defeat that was the beginning of this whole situation being reversed was 1956, when Khrushchev got up. Stalin had died. After Stalin had died, there'd been a fight within the Soviet Communist Party. Molotov and his followers were on one side, and Khrushchev and his followers were on another side, and there was a fight, and Khrushchev became the leader of the Soviet Union. And they had the 20th Party Congress, where Khrushchev solidified his grip over the Soviet Communist Party. What did Khrushchev do at the 20th Party Congress? He took a dump all over Stalin. And it was devastating to people in the Soviet Union and to people all over the world in the communist movement. And Khrushchev got up, and basically he got up and he said, you know, all the stuff they were saying about Stalin being a brutal dictator, being a mass murderer, being a coward who wasn't a good ally in World War II, all that's true. And why did Khrushchev do this? Because Khrushchev was looking to solidify his own grip on power. Khrushchev wanted to be the new boss. And that Stalin had done so much, right? You have to understand what Stalin did. Stalin had overseen the Soviet people fully industrializing their country. He had been their leader while the Nazis had invaded, while 27 million people died. He'd led them through a horrendous war. He'd led them to rebuild after the war. The Soviet people had an attachment to Stalin that was deeply, deeply spiritual. He had been, they talk about the role of czars in Russian history. The czar was like a sacred figure. He was more than a man. He was like the guy, he was like the spiritual leader of the country. He was the czar was the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. And that, the title, was more than the man, right? And Stalin had played the role of the father of this country, the Soviet Union. And he'd held the country together. And he had been the voice on the radio, encouraging the people to withstand and fight. And amid all of it, amid all of that hardship, Stalin had been the face of it. And to average people in the Soviet Union, even today, right? There's wild admiration for Stalin in modern day Russia. He was considered to be this godlike figure. He was this man who had led the people to do miracles, to industrialize, to defeat foreign invaders, to invent space travel. He was just this godlike figure. And the bulk of the Soviet people had never met him, or if they had, it had only been at one point, right? He would visit different factories, and that's what Stalin did. He spent his whole life just going around visiting factories and giving people rewards. Right? Stalin's job, he was the CEO. The Soviet Union was like a giant corporation. Right? The government owned all the industries, but the people who worked the hardest got rewards. That was Stakhanovism. Right? If you worked the hardest, you got a reward. Well, Stalin was the guy who handed out the reward. He was the CEO, and he would visit your factory, and if you had worked harder than everybody else and all of that, you got a medal from Stalin, you got a cash bonus from Stalin. And that's what Stalin did. He spent his whole life going from factory to factory, from military base to military base, rewarding people who worked hard. That's what Stalin did. He was the boss at the center of it, and his job was to motivate everyone to work hard. So a lot of Soviet people had met Stalin or seen Stalin, but most of them had not worked with Stalin and not intimately known Stalin. But there was a big bureaucracy in the Soviet Union. Right? A lot of, Stalin was at the top. He was the man at the top, but there was a lot of people underneath him. And when you were in Stalin's shoes, there's no way you could have done Stalin's job and not stepped on a lot of people. Right? There were a lot of decisions that Stalin had to make that you and I would never want to make in our lives. You could never imagine making in our lives. For example, in the lead up to World War II, they're trying to get their farming system going, right? They're trying to get their farming system going. There's a crop failure. They have a shortage of wheat. But in order to get farm tools, in order to get tractors so they can rebuild their agricultural system, they already have a shortage of wheat. They already have not enough wheat to go around, but they're going to have the same problem the next year and the next year if they don't get some tractors. So under those circumstances, Stalin says, okay, we've already got a food shortage going on, but if we sell some of this wheat, if we export some of this grain, we'll then have the money with which we can get tractors and not have this problem next year. And so Stalin had to make the tough decisions, right? I can't imagine being in a situation where you've already got people starving to death. And you have to decide, okay, well, if more people starve to death this year, we can get tractors so we don't have this problem next year. I mean, you can't imagine. In a situation like that, how could you not hurt a lot of people, right? During World War II, they moved people around on the basis of their nationality. Everyone in the Soviet Union had a government ID, and that government ID said Russian, it said Chechen, it said Moldovan, it said Jew, it said Lithuanian on it. And they, in order to win the war, in order to be strategic, in order to fight the Nazis, they had to move people around on the basis of their nationality. Can you imagine how difficult that would be? Millions of Jews got saved by Stalin because he had a policy as if the Nazis were coming into this area, all the people whose ID says Jew get moved out, and millions got saved. However, in Chechnya, there was a pro-Nazi uprising among the Chechens. There was a group of Chechens who didn't like the Russians, who were armed by the Nazis. So what did Stalin do? He moved all the Chechens out of Chechnya. They called it a forced deportation. Why? Because they had to defeat the enemy. And they didn't want to separate sons from fathers. They didn't want to search every house. So they said, all right, we're just moving all the Chechens out of Chechnya so that we can defeat the pro-Nazi insurgents. Is that a good situation where you've lived in this area for thousands of years, your family, your ethnic group has lived there, and then there's a war going on in which 27 million people die, and so the government shows up and the military shows up and they said, all right, we're moving all the Chechens out of here so we can defeat the insurgents. How can you not hurt a lot of people in situations like this, right? There's no way you could be Stalin and not hurt a lot of people and have a lot of people cursing you out and thinking you were awful, right? We talk about Stalin being brutal, Stalin being authoritarian. You look at the situation Stalin was in. There's no way Stalin could not have been that, okay? But still, because the Nazis had been defeated, because the country had been raised up from poverty, because so many great victories had happened during that year, to the bulk of the Soviet population, Stalin was a hero. But especially to the bureaucracy, to many of the local government people, many of the people in the Supreme Soviet and the government officials, they couldn't stand that guy. They lived in fear of that guy. They were angry with times that guy had taken decisions that had hurt people that were important to them. Right? And you and I can look at the situation objectively and see everything. But if this is your village, if this is your area, if this is your family that's getting hurt, there's going to be lots of people, especially people in the bureaucracy, who are going to think that guy's a tyrant, that guy's a murderer, that guy destroyed my family, that guy killed my friend, that guy had a policy or made a policy decision that resulted in. So there was within the bureaucracy of the Soviet government, there were a lot of people that had a bone to pick with Stalin, that felt that Stalin had made decisions that had hurt them. And there's no way that anyone in Stalin's position could not have done that. But Khrushchev, he's the up-and-coming leader of the Soviet Party. And he's got some pretty big shoes to fill, right? The guy who came before him literally defeated the Nazis, literally made the country a superpower. Stalin's some pretty big shoes to fill. And everyone's constantly wondering, will Khrushchev be as good as Stalin? Khrushchev's under a lot of pressure. Am I going to be able to do as well as the man of steel? So Khrushchev, because he wants to make sure that he's not judged too harshly, because he's hoping to make sure that he's not, he's not just completely under Stalin's shadow, decides that in order to secure his own position, for his own short-term gain, that he will take a dump all over Stalin. And part of the reason he takes a dump all over Stalin is about the fact that he wants to negotiate with America. He's convinced that the Americans will de-escalate the nuclear arms race and make a deal with America. But in order to do that, he's got to send a message to the Americans. I'm not Stalin. I know Stalin gave you all those problems and all that. I'm not Stalin. Say hi to Metches. He has to say, I'm not Stalin. He has to send a message to the Americans that I want to negotiate. And on top of that, Molotov, his rival, Khrushchev's rival in the Soviet government, Molotov doesn't want to negotiate with the Americans. Molotov says that the Americans are untrustworthy, says they need to be really friendly to China and do everything they can to stay friendly with China. Molotov really likes Mao. Khrushchev doesn't like Mao. Khrushchev wants to negotiate with the Americans. Molotov says it's more important to stay friendly with Mao. There's a disagreement. So in order to get the upper hand and make sure that Molotov doesn't beat Khrushchev, Khrushchev gives his secret speech. And his secret speech was given with the intent to tarnish Stalin's image, to weaken the Molotov faction of the party that is more in line with what Stalin believed, to send a message to the Americans that he wants to negotiate and that he's more willing to negotiate and that he's not like that Stalin guy they couldn't stand. And on top of that, he's trying to make sure that he's no longer compared to his predecessor. He's trying to improve the fact that he's in Stalin's shadow. He wants to say, well, that guy who came before me that you're always comparing me to, he wasn't so great after all. So he gives his secret speech. And that secret speech was devastating. It devastated the global communist movement. It devastated the global communist movement. People resigned. In the Western countries, people resigned from the communist parties in mass. People were horrified. They said, for years, we denied. We said it wasn't true. And now the leader of the Soviet government himself, Khrushchev, is saying that all these awful things Stalin did was true. And people started quitting the communist parties in mass. And then in Hungary, same year, 1956, there's an armed uprising against the Soviet government, against the Soviet-aligned Hungarian government. There's an uprising. Well, Khrushchev has just told the world, Stalin was no good. Stalin was a dictator. Stalin was a mass murderer. And so under these circumstances, when there's an armed uprising going on in Hungary, and the leaders of the armed uprising are saying, we're anti-Stalinist. Stalin oppressed us in Hungary. We're not against communism. We're fighting for democratic socialism. It was all a lie. They were Nazi sympathizers largely. They were former fascist collaborators. But regardless, they're saying that we're anti-Stalinist. There's a big chunk of the global communist movement that says, well, maybe these Hungarians that are rising up against the Soviet-aligned Communist Party, maybe they're good. The Chinese communists went to go meet with the Hungarian communists, and they met them, and they said, these guys are anti-communists, they're fascists. And then they supported the Soviet Union. But Yugoslavia, that had already had a falling out with Stalin, Yugoslavia supported the Hungarian fascists. And the Trotskyites of the world supported the Hungarian fascists. There was even a faction in the Communist Party USA led by a guy named John Gates that supported the Hungarian fascists. And it makes sense that there would be so much sympathy for these Hungarians that are fighting against Stalinism when the leader of the Soviet Communist Party himself said that there was something to all this anti-Stalinism stuff. And so, of course, the Soviet Union has to send its troops into Hungary, and they do. And they put down the Hungarian uprising. And, of course, mainstream media plays up the idea, oh, there's a workers' revolution in Hungary, and the brutal Stalinists have put it down. And the Trotskyite groups are all rallying in support of Hungary. And it was a PR disaster. And that was the beginning of problems. 1961, China is getting pretty fed up with Khrushchev. Because Khrushchev is saying that the United States has the atomic bomb. And because the United States has the atomic bomb, you got to call off world revolution. People in Africa that are living under apartheid conditions, that are living under brutal military dictatorships, well, they just have to put down their guns. They can't defend themselves. They can't fight back because America has the atomic bomb. We don't want to have a nuclear war. People in Asia, people that are living under authoritarian regimes, peasants that want to fight for themselves, they can't do it. America has the atomic bomb. We don't want to risk nuclear war. Well, Mao Zedong, he says the atomic bomb is a paper tiger. He says the people of the world are rising up against imperialism. Mao says, no, I'm not going to tell other people in Asia. I'm not going to tell people in Africa to lay down their guns. Not going to do it. No. This is revisionism, he says. He says, yes, we would prefer a peaceful transition to socialism. We'd prefer that. It's always preferable to have a peaceful transition, which Mao did say. But he publishes this document called Long Live Leninism, where he says, yes, we would prefer a peaceful transition, but that's rarely possible. And we believe in the right of people in the colonized world to take up arms and defend themselves and have a revolution. And the Soviet Union says, well, we're going to cut off all our aid to China. And so China loses its aid. All the Soviet aid that had been helping them build their hospitals and their power plants gets cut off from China. Same with Albania. Albania, an Eastern European country that, they get all the aid cut off from them. The Soviet Union cuts diplomatic relations with Albania, completely punishes Albania for the fact that they align with Mao. And that was the beginning. And then what happened? Well, China spent the first decade following their falling out with the Soviet Union trying to be way more communist than the Soviet Union. That was the first decade. They launched the Cultural Revolution. They said, Khrushchev is negotiating with the imperialists, but we are going to show that Khrushchev's a phony. We're going to be so much more ultra-revolutionary than the Soviet Union. Big mistake. They try to create an egalitarian society in poverty. They try to make everyone in China absolutely equal. They take the young people in the cities and they deport them to the countryside to live in poverty so that it's more fair. They punish people and it was a disaster. It was a disaster. You can read Long Live Leninism. Thank you, David. Very good document. But it was a disaster, the Cultural Revolution. So after 10 years of trying to out-communist the Soviet Union, trying to show the world that they are the most communist country in the world, which is a trap because you can't build communism in poverty. Marx makes that abundantly clear. The basis of breaking down inequality is abundance. Right? You cannot create communism by sheer force of will. It doesn't work that way. The breaking down of inequality is based on an expansion of the means of production. It's a mistake that they're making. It's because they're barricaded, because the Soviet Union that was their ally cut them off. They fall into this trap. Well, after a decade of doing that, after a decade of being cut off by the Soviet Union, Richard Nixon comes to China. And they welcome Richard Nixon as a hero. And then they announce that the Soviet Union is the main danger. And in Angola, the China-aligned communists line up with the CIA to fight the MPLA. And all the various brutal dictators backed by the United States that are hostile to the Soviet Union start making friends with China. Haile Selassie, the emperor of Ethiopia, makes friends with Mao in China. The Shah of Iran sends his wife to meet with Mao in China. And China starts aligning with all of the U.S.-backed dictators. Pinochet comes to power in Chile, kills thousands of communists. China embraces Pinochet. So much so that the Maoists of Pinochet write a letter to Mao and say, how can you do this? We're being slaughtered here. There's a famous document by the Revolutionary Communist Party of Chile, a Maoist communist group in Chile, saying to China, how can you do this? How can you do this? But there's a reason, because they needed to develop. China's a poor country, and you can't build communism in poverty. They need foreign investment, and they need to get their people, their economy going again. Well, after Mao dies, China starts enacting market reforms. Then Albania, the leader of Albania, Enver Hoxha, he says, well, the Chinese have sold out now too. Just like the Soviets sold out, the Chinese have sold out. So then Albania cuts ties with China. Albania proclaims that Albania is the only true communist country in the world. China's sold out. The Soviet Union is sold out. Albania cuts ties with them. Same time, 1978, the Italian Communist Party, the Spanish Communist Party, the French Communist Party, they see all the bad press the Soviet Union's getting. And they realize that a lot of their members, a lot of their most high-ranking members, they don't realize this. It's just a fact. People like Louis Althusser, all kinds of their members are academics. They're college professors. And they're all getting grant money to do their research. And Antonio Gramsci, who had been the leader of the Italian Communist Party, who'd been in prison, his prison notebooks get published. And there's all this academic interest in Antonio Gramsci. There's big conferences all across Europe of academics studying the writings of Antonio Gramsci. And Gramsci says to focus on cultural issues, not economics, right? And to fight against hegemony, right? Gramsci, this big, they dig up this Italian communist leader who'd been in prison, and they take his prison notebooks where he couldn't use communist words because the prison censors would cross it out. So he wrote them kind of in code. And he emphasized the cultural struggle, and he denounced economic determinism. And all over Europe, all these college professors are getting money. They're getting work. They're getting grant money and foundation money to write books about the cultural hegemony and Antonio Gramsci. There's the Frankfurt School in Germany. They have got all this money to hire college professors to make movie reviews and all of this. So all these college professors in West Germany and Italy and in Spain and in France are all getting paid lots of money to talk about communism, but to talk about it differently, to talk about it in a way that doesn't emphasize, the whole working class, capitalist class thing, but instead talks about, the alienation of the individual and consumer society not being right, and really emphasize sexual freedom, right? The sexual minorities and sexual liberation. Oh, and you got to talk about the colonized psychology, right? And you got to talk about Frantz Fanon and the mindset of the colonized person. And this whole wing of Marxism that's very much in the French Communist Party, the Italian Communist Party, the Spanish Communist Party. It's all been set up, but all of these prominent communists who just happen to be working as college professors are all getting paid lots of money. Their bread and butter depends on it. They're getting to talk about communism, but they're being nudged to talk about it in a certain way that doesn't talk about overproduction, doesn't talk about the tendency of the falling rate of profit, doesn't talk about that, and is always critical of the Soviet Union and is always critical of those communist governments that are authoritarian. Well, as a result of what we now know was a CIA operation, the Congress for Cultural Freedom, it was Pete Buttigieg's dad. Pete Buttigieg's father was the founder and director of the International Gramsci Society. That tells you what's going on right there. Pete Buttigieg's father was running it. Herbert Marcuse, Theodore Adorno. This was all CIA. This was all a government operation, and there's no disputing that. This is fact. But they didn't know that at the time. They just thought they were getting grant money to talk about communism. As a result of that, the Italian Communist Party denounces the Soviet Union. Spanish Communist Party denounces the Soviet Union. French Communist Party denounces the Soviet Union. 3 huge communist parties in Western Europe that have millions of members. They're still big parties. They still have members of parliament, but they're not friendly to the Soviet Union anymore. No, they've cut their ties. And then, obviously, that leads to a situation where even within the Soviet Communist Party, you have a new generation that comes in, a new generation, and I've talked about the collapse of the Soviet Union in great detail elsewhere. I'm not going to talk about that tonight. But that's how we got from here to the fall of the Soviet Union in the 1990s. It was a long process of divide and conquer. It was a long process of manipulating people against each other. It was a long process of people's egos being manipulated, people's interests being played against each other, people being nudged and directed. It was a long process of manipulation of our movement. That is how the USA won the Cold War. That is how they went from where we were in the 1950s to where we are now. And it's a long, depressing story. But if there's anything we can learn from it, it's that our enemies are constantly trying to incite us against each other. Our enemies are constantly trying to play favorites, be nice to some of us and promote some of us while inciting others again. That these are the tricks that they use. They play a long game, and they learned to play a long game. Over the course of the late Cold War, Brzezinski, Henry Kissinger, they got the upper hand, and they are the guys who play a long game. The military-industrial complex, that just, Curtis LeMay, who said bomb them into the Stone Age in Vietnam, he was playing a short game. He was thinking, how do we win the battle today? But Brzezinski and Henry Kissinger, 2 very, very evil but very, very smart men, they were thinking, how do we play a long game? And that's how they won. And I want people to be aware of this because obviously things have changed since then. This isn't the 1990s anymore. Bolivarianism is rising in Latin America, the axis of resistance in the Middle East. China and Russia are rising strong as independent countries. We're not in that bad situation. But how was that epic defeat? 1989, 1990, 1991. How was that epic defeat? How was that global regression of the 1990s possible? It was possible because they played us against each other. That's how it was possible. And I want everyone to think about that because we need to keep this in mind in our time. Now, I want to see if I can show you a clip of the next thing that I want to show you. I wish I could show you the Oscars speech, but every time I've tried to show it on a stream, I get dinged. They take the whole stream down. You can't show it on a stream. You know, so, but 1978, Vanessa Redgrave got an Oscar. You know, she got an Oscar, and, you know, I will, you know, she got up, she got an Oscar for her role in the movie Julia, and she thanked the Academy for giving her the award and not listening to a bunch of Zionist hoodlums who are a disgrace to the legacy of Jewish people everywhere. Wow. That's what she said, you know, from the stage at her Oscars speech, right? 1978. Let me see if I can, I think, can I show it this way or, well, this is a clip of Vanessa Redgrave. Maybe I can show this clip. But Vanessa Redgrave, great actress, right? She's an actress, and she wins the Academy Award for Best Actress in 1978. And, you know, at the time that she won the award, you have to remember what was going on was that she had made a documentary about the Palestinians. And so all the pro-Israel people were threatening the Academy Awards. They were like, do not give her the award. Do not let her get the Academy Award. But she still won it because she was a well-respected actress. You know, she was from a well-known British acting family. I think her father had been a very famous Shakespearean actor. And, you know, she got the award. But then she used her speech at the Oscars to rant against the Zionists, right? There's been a lot of talk of this lately. I'll show you. I guess this video I might get away with showing, right? The actual Academy Award footage you can't show because the Academy like protects that footage. But this is a clip. Let's see if I can get away with this. Oh, here we go. Here we go.
And I salute you, and I pay tribute to you, and I think you should be very proud that in the last few weeks you've stood firm, and you have refused to be intimidated by the threats of a small bunch of Zionist hoodlums whose behavior is an insult to the stature of Jews all over the world and to their great and heroic record of struggle against fascism and oppression.
Yeah, that was an epic moment at the Oscars, a very epic moment. It looks like I got through. It looks like, yeah, I was able to show that. I was able to use it from that TikTok. That's how it slipped through. I've tried to show that footage on these streams before, and it doesn't let me. But so she gave that speech at the Oscars. Now, she had made a film about the Palestinians. It was called The Palestinians. And she had made this movie, and she had screened it all over the world. Showing the world about the Palestinians and their oppression. Now, you have to remember, in these times, it was very, very unacceptable to talk about the Palestinians. Right? At anti-war rallies, you couldn't talk about the Palestinians. You know, socialist and leftist events, it was considered offensive to Jewish people to talk about the Palestinians. there was almost no Palestine solidarity in Britain and America. But she was a trendsetter, right? In America, you know, the big anti-war rallies during the Vietnam War were run by the Socialist Workers' Party, the SWP. And the SWP officially supported Palestine. And in the militant, they would run articles about the Palestinians, pictures of Palestinian fighters. But if anyone ever came to an anti-war rally with a Palestine flag, they would send their marshals to take the Palestine flag away, right? You know, they would demand that you could not talk about Palestine. And that was generally the position. You know, the Communist Party USA officially recognized Israel, though it disagreed with its foreign policy. And it was, even some of the communist groups that did support the Palestinians, they had a policy of, we just don't talk about it, right? It was too dangerous to talk about it. Well, Vanessa Redgrave, she talked about it. Why? Why did Vanessa Redgrave talk about it? Well, this is what you need to understand. Vanessa Redgrave talked about it because of this man, Jerry Healey. Who was Jerry Healey? More people need to know who Jerry Healey was. You folks know I don't like Trotskyism. I am not a fan of Trotskyites. So it is very rare that I will have anything positive to say about a Trotskyite. But there is one Trotskyite that I have anything positive to say about. Well, Sam Marcy, I praise him a little bit too. This guy was kind of like Sam Marcy. He was a very prominent British Trotskyite named Jerry Healey. And Jerry Healey, he was a British Trotskyist. He had tried to infiltrate the British Labour Party and been kicked out. And Jerry Healey liked Gaddafi. Right? He liked Gaddafi. He went to Libya and he saw what Gaddafi was doing in Libya. In the 1970s, he saw what Gaddafi was doing in Libya. He saw what Saddam Hussein was doing in Iraq. He saw what Bashar Assad was doing in Syria. And he said, unlike all the other Trotskyists, all the other Trotskyites hated Libya. They all hated Syria. They hated Iraq. He said that these are socialist societies. Jerry Healey, for whatever reason, he was a Trotskyite. He was, you know, but because at the time there was a wave of third world anti-colonial revolutions, and because the Middle East was, you know, rising up against British imperialism and American imperialism. And, you know, I don't know why, but this guy, I mean, he wasn't in the official Communist Party of Britain, which was very revisionist and was following Khrushchev. So maybe that's what gave him an opening. I can't tell you why, right? I don't know about Jerry Healey well enough. Okay. I can't tell you why. And I mean, he definitely was a Trotskyite if there ever was one, but he was the leader of British Trotskyism. And he was an older dude who could remember the 1930s, and he was mentoring a lot of the young 1960s radicals. And he became a supporter of the Palestinians, and he became a supporter of Gaddafi. And he was very, very charismatic. He was a great speaker and a great writer. And there were many, many young British people that were involved in anti-war protests who didn't want to join the boring, stodgy old Communist Party of Britain that was supporting the Labour Party and never talked about socialism. They wanted to follow Jerry Healey. And Jerry Healey, for whatever reason, even though all the other Trotskyites were supporting imperialism, based on his own interpretation of Trotsky, he decided that you had to support the Palestinians, you had to support Gaddafi, you had to support Saddam Hussein, you had to support Bashar Assad in Syria, you had to support Cuba. I mean, he took some good positions. This is Jerry Healey.
We continue this struggle. We are here and we are fighting as never before to develop it on the widest possible front. And when we look at the achievements, financial, technical, without any assistance, except from who? The youth, the young trade unionists, in the factories, who gave us this means. We now can present the two basic ingredients of the workers' press. Firstly, the continuity of Bolshevism by those who have continued break now no more than we broke in the 30s. We're not going to give up the production of this paper because of some difficulties. We're very confident. Indeed, we can afford to be confident. We start this paper not at all on a shoestring. We started with the most modern, technical innovations in the printing industry. And we started in London, in the center. We are not only preparing to produce this paper in large quantities over the next 2 years, we're already negotiating for a press that will produce not just 22,000 copies an hour, but 60,000 copies an hour. We are not going to fold up. On the contrary, we have only just started. We have enormous technical resources. We will not only produce our paper, we will do what was impossible in the early 1920s. We will show it on screens all over the country, in talking pictures, produced by our own sympathizers. So it's different. Not only that.
Look at all those people. There were thousands of young people in Britain who became supporters of the Palestinians, became supporters of Gaddafi, became supporters of the Cubans and the North Koreans because of this guy, Jerry Healey. And, it was a weird development. It was a weird development. He was anti-Soviet and against the Soviet Union. And it was a weird development. But you had this guy in Britain, Jerry Healey, who was a big supporter of the Soviet Union, or he was a big supporter of the Palestinians. And they had rallies for the Palestinians. And the Jewish Defense League would beat them up and threaten them. And they recruited Vanessa Redgrave, this very famous actress. And she made a movie about the Palestinians, and she screened it all over the world, raising awareness about the Palestinians. It was a great group. Did they have problems? Sure. Were there issues in the group? Sure. But Jerry Healey built an organization of anti-imperialists and anti-Zionists in Britain that had thousands of members, and it was a massive organization. And he was a personal friend of Gaddafi. He rode on Gaddafi's helicopter. He went to Libya at least once a year to spend time with Gaddafi. Gaddafi was his good friend, and he built this massive anti-imperialist organization. They would have a training school every summer where there'd be thousands of young people would come, and they would rally, and they would sell newspapers. They had a daily newspaper that was published every single day, and they would sell it door to door in Britain, and they were just this massive anti-imperialist organization. So what happened? Well, you can read about it in this book. I recommend you read this book, Jerry Healey, A Revolutionary Life. It goes into great detail about what happened. And I'll read to you what was said on the back. This book is endorsed by Ken Livingstone. Do you guys know who Ken Livingstone was? A member of the British Parliament. Ken Livingstone was also the mayor of London. Okay? Ken Livingstone is not some crazy nut, some random intellectual. The mayor of London, a member of the British Parliament, and the mayor of the biggest city, the capital of UK, that said this. This is what he says. It's on the back of this book. At a time when political memories are growing increasingly short, it is good that an effort has been made to record the life of Jerry Healey, a revolutionary Marxist who had a massive impact on the working class and socialist movement in Britain and internationally. I have never changed my belief that the split in the Workers' Revolutionary Party of 1985 was the work of MI5 agents. 1985, what happened? What happened? Well, Jerry Healey, he was single, right? He was a bachelor. I guess he'd been married at one point and divorced. He was having an affair with his secretary, his personal secretary who helped run the party. He and her were having an affair. Is that moral? I don't know. I mean, not my business. But he was never married to her. And he had other girlfriends in the Workers' Revolutionary Party. The guy, you know, he was quite I don't know what you want to call it. He was, I don't know, a womanizer. He had girlfriends. Well, the secretary found out about the other girlfriends. She was mad about it. You know, again, this sounds like an episode of Jerry Springer. This sounds like drama. This sounds like something that has absolutely nothing to do with the Palestinians, absolutely nothing to do with Gaddafi, absolutely nothing to do with the working class struggle. This guy, his personal life, there was some drama, okay? There was a woman he was involved with, and there were some other women that he was involved with. They were not married to each other. They weren't in a committed relationship. Maybe he lied. I don't know what happened. But this girlfriend of his went to the mainstream media and got some of his ex-girlfriends together, went to the mainstream media. They accused Jerry Healey of rape. And if you read the allegations against Jerry Healey, they said it was rape, not because it wasn't consensual. Because it was consensual in every situation. It was rape because the women were made to feel like he was a great communist leader when they had sex with him. He was never prosecuted for rape because that's not rape. Okay? Rape is rape. We all know what rape is. Having sex with someone because you think they are a great communist leader is not rape. Right? Was it moral what Jerry did? I don't know. Probably not. Right? You got to keep your sex life out of political organizations. But Jerry Healey was not a rapist. And if you read any of the accounts of what happened, the guy had girlfriends. As Gabby says, he was a player. Yeah, right. He had some girlfriends. He screwed his secretary. He screwed some other women. The secretary got mad that he screwed the other women. So they all went to the press and said, Jerry Healey raped us. Well, there was never any police investigation because it wasn't rape. It was Jerry Healey, you know, he slept with women, right? And if you read any of the accounts, and they're all in here, the women who say he raped them, what they say is, well, we had sex with him under false pretenses because we thought he was an important leader. Thank you, Gala. We thought he was an important leader. We thought he was an important leader at the time, and we felt that it was our duty to have sex with him because he was such an important leader. Yeah. And that got all over the media. But at the time that this got all over the media, this is very interesting. At the time that this got all over the media, there were already people within the Workers' Revolutionary Party who had been buying up the assets of the Workers' Revolutionary Party. And they'd been stealing money from the party. And so at the time that these allegations came out, they basically were able to steal the party's assets. And if you read this book, just read it for yourself. Right? You read this book for yourself. This was a government operation. The Israeli government, Mossad, was not happy about the fact that there was this group with thousands and thousands of people in it that was rallying for the Palestinians, that had their member get on the Oscars and rant against Zionist hoodlums. And so they sent agents into Jerry Healey's organization to stir up gossip, and the group ended up collapsing. Well, Vanessa Redgrave, I couldn't agree with you more, Terry. Couldn't agree with you more. You got to keep your personal life out of the group. I mean, you cannot mix the two. Vanessa Redgrave, the famous actress, she stood by Jerry Healey until the end. And actually, if you read this book, she defended Jerry Healey. She said, this is bullshit, right? He had some girlfriends, you know, he had some affairs he shouldn't have had. This is bullshit. Ken Livingston, the mayor of London, also says, yeah, this is bullshit. But I want to let you know somebody who doesn't say it was bullshit. And that's this guy. Right? This relates to some American politics right now. Some of you may know who this person is. Right? Some of you may know who he is. Some of you may not. I'm trying to get you a picture of him that'll be big enough. But it's worth noting this. This guy. Oh, goodness. Give me a picture that's full-sized, please. I just want a picture that'll fill up the screen. Come on. Come on. Give me a picture that'll fill up the screen. All right. This one will have to do. All right. Some people may know who this guy is. Some of you may know who he is. Some of you may not. That guy is the editor of the World Socialist website. That's David North. People know World Socialist website, WSWS.org. Well, that guy's the guy who runs it. His name is David North. David North. And David North was one of the main people denouncing the Rage Against the War Machine rally. And David North also is one of the main people who started the campaign against Jimmy Dore. Did you know about this? Right? Jimmy Dore, it was one of his associates. It was David North is the boss of the World Socialist website, but it was one of Jimmy Dore, one of this guy's associates. I can't even remember his name. Who was being interviewed by Jimmy Dore. What was his name? Oh goodness. It was Jimmy Dore interviewed. Yeah, here it is. It was this guy. All right, I'll even put it on. Why not? Right? Right? It was a guy who works for the World Socialist website. Guy who works for the World Socialist website. This is all important. It's all related to what we're doing now. All right? So Jimmy Dore had scheduled an interview with what he thought was just a socialist to talk about a strike that was happening. And before that interview, he'd interviewed a young anarchist gun rights activist from the state of Michigan. And so Jimmy Dore, he was just going to have this regular interview to talk about a strike that was going on. And the guy's name was Jerome White, one of David North's associates, got on there and they never got to talk about the strike. Never got to talk about the strike because of the fact that this guy had to denounce Jimmy Dore and disrespect Jimmy Dore on his own show for daring to interview a Bugaloo boy. Do people remember this? And this was the beginning of the Cancel Jimmy Dore campaign. It started with the World Socialist website. Right? We'll put some of that on just to refresh people's memory as the clip is downloading. We'll put some of that on. And then, after denouncing, it wasn't the Proud Boys, it was the Bugaloo Boys. Big difference. Bugaloo Boys are a gun rights organization. Proud Boys are a racist group. But Bugaloo Boys are just a gun club, right? But a little bit of a difference there. It's similar, right? But Jerome White of the World Socialist website got on there, and here we'll put the clip on. Just let me move the file here now that it's done downloading. All right, we'll put some of this on, and I'll show you about what a train wreck this was. This was the beginning of Jimmy Dore's cancellation. Here we go. We'll skip through it. We're not going to watch the whole thing. It's 45 minutes, but we'll skip through it.
This guy who
okay, so
policy.
which has left more than 420,000 people dead in the United States. And in fact, one of the chief demands of the Hunts Point workers is against the terrible conditions that have led to 400 infections and 6 deaths amongst the Hunts Point workers. I mean, the idea that somehow this is the unity of left and right. I mean, what is there is a historical precedent. The Nazis called themselves revolutionists. They called themselves.
He's calling Jimmy Dore a Nazi because he interviewed the Bugaloo Boys. Look at the face of Jimmy Dore right there. He's just like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Opponents of even, well, they call.
So he's literally calling a guy who was a guest on my show right before him, a guy who's pro-LGBTQ, pro-Black Lives Matter, anti-police brutality, anti-war, anti-imperialism, and anti the two-party corporate duopoly. And he's anti-ICE. And this guy's calling him a Nazi. It's kind of like the people like this on the left want to drive a wedge in our country.
The international Jewish capitalist conspiracy. This has nothing to do with left politics. It has nothing to do with progressive politics. My movement, the Socialist Equality Party, we're seeking to build a genuine movement of the working class. That's why we've intervened among the striking workers at Hunts Point. We are above all internationalists. I mean, the right wing promotes nationalism. They tell American workers, as Trump does, that the cause of our problems are Mexican workers stealing our jobs, everything the trade unions have promoted for 40 years that have produced a disaster for the working class. American workers are in a struggle against global corporations, global banks, and we cannot take one step forward unless we unite with our brothers and sisters all over the world against the capitalist system.
But not people willing to unite with you in your own country. You're going to be able to vet people in other countries for their whatever it is you don't like about them. But a guy right here who's, again, pro-LGBTQ, pro-Black Lives Matter, anti-police brutality, anti-ICE, that guy's somehow beyond the pale for guys like that. And you see why lefties don't organize right. You see why. You see why you never heard of this guy. You see why this guy's never accomplished anything.
So I really wanted to make that very clear. It is flirting with such elements, the libertarian elements, right-wing elements like that. I mean, those are the people who...
You're flirting with libertarian... Oh, my God. You're not allowed to talk to libertarians. You're flirting with You're flirting? You mean I'm working with other Americans on a common interest? Like when Bernie Sanders works with that right-winger Mike Lee on Yemen, that's bad.
Stormed the U.S. Capitol on January 6th.
This guy. And
they're being pulled around by the nose by very powerful political and corporate forces, using the anger that people feel over the economic disaster, small businesses being put out of work, but they are being mobilized for right-wing purposes. We oppose that.
So I just want to remind you who this guy is. So if you haven't seen that, the video he dropped yesterday, the interview with him, you should go watch it. It's really fascinating. I was surprised almost every time he said something. So here, I'll just play this little piece for you. You're anti-war, you're for peace, you're against racism, you're against police brutality. What else? What would be some other big things?
Pro-sex work decriminalization, legalize all drugs, end all the wars, close the ICE detainment camps. Pretty much our core foundation is if you're not a bigoted piece of shit and you understand that both parties are the problem.
Right. So you get it, right? And that was the beginning of the Cancel Jimmy Dore campaign. And it was started by a follower of David North. A follower of David North. Right? It was a follower of David North who launched that campaign against Jimmy Dore. Well, folks, I have something right here in my hand. Right here in my hand that shows you why that's relevant to everything I just told you. This is called Jerry Healey and His Place in the Fourth International by David North. And I bought this book from the World Socialist website. David North was the director of Jerry Healey's American organization. Let that sink in for a moment. This guy who led the campaign to cancel Jimmy Dore, who led the campaign against the Rage Against the War Machine rally, was the leader of Jerry Healey's American organization and betrayed Jerry Healey. And you can read about it in his book. He wrote, Trotskyism Betrayed. He describes Jerry Healey as flirting with that evil Stalinist Gaddafi. He describes Jerry Healey as not understanding dialecta wada bada bada bada. And you read it and he makes all kinds of excuses about how at a time that the mainstream media was viciously targeting the Workers' Revolutionary Party in what was very obviously a Mossad operation, he stabbed his mentor and teacher in the back. He betrayed his organization and stabbed Jerry Healey in the back. And he wrote a book about it. And he doesn't accuse Jerry Healey of rape because he knows that's bullshit. But he does say that, oh, Jerry Healey had some girlfriends and that's not good. But the main thing is a bunch of dialectical blah, 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 blah. He didn't understand blah, blah, blah. And he didn't agree with me about blah, 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 blah. And so at the same time that the mainstream media was going after Jerry Healey, and at the same time the government was demonizing Jerry Healey, and I knew it was bullshit, but, I'm just a self-interested jackass, and, I blah, 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 blah. And so I didn't stand behind. Read it. Read it. He doesn't accuse Jerry Healey of rape. He knows that Jerry Healey wasn't a rapist. But he says, oh, he had some girlfriends, and he flirted, and blah, 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 blah. And, he liked Gaddafi way too much, and that Gaddafi wasn't a real communist and was a bourgeois nationalist, blah, 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 blah. I mean... Yeah. Yeah. I'm just telling you all. I am just telling you all what's going on here. So is it any shocker that this guy targeted Jimmy Dore? Is it any shocker that this guy targeted the Rage Against the War Machine rally and called it a white supremacist rally, was trying to incite government repression against it? He did it to his own mentor. He did it to his own teacher. David North is another Khrushchev. For his own personal gain, he helped destroy a very important anti-imperialist organization. And, I don't know who you are, Ken, but you beat me to the punch, because this is great. Mr. David North, his name is not actually David North. That's his party name, right? That's so the government doesn't know what his real name is, right? He's hiding from the government, right? He's got to have his secret code name. His real name is David Green. And if you Google David North, David Green, you will find out that David North used the money that he took from Jerry Healey to set up a non-union print company in Michigan. Grand River Printing. Google Grand River Printing. And it just so happens that of all the printing companies that the New York Times hires them to print their newspaper. Who'd have guessed, right? The main propagandist outlet of the American government. They just, the New York Times, Grand River Printing, that's who prints the New York Times for the Midwest. Just so happens to be contracted by a guy who's also a revolutionary Trotskyist and also betrayed and sold out Jerry Healey. David W. Green is the CEO of Grand River Printing. He's a millionaire many times over. And he runs a non-union print shop that he set up with money he stole from Jerry Healey. People get rewarded. People get rewarded for their work. And it just so happens to print all the New York Times, all the mainstream media publications. You can Google it. You can read all about it. You can read all about the Northites. There's a great article, Northites Incorporated. I mean, are we surprised that David North is sold out his teacher? Are we surprised that Jimmy Dore started a hate cancel culture campaign directed against Jimmy Dore? Are we surprised that David North incited a campaign against the Rage Against the War Machine rally and called it a Nazi gathering and tried to justify a government crackdown on it? Are we surprised that you won't find anything on the World Socialist website about the Uhuru case? Probably the most important case in America right now, the Uhuru case. Right? You won't find anything about it. Oh, no, you'll find something. DOJ accuses black nationalists of conspiring with Russia. You'll find something. Here it is. I'm not seeing any defense. I'm not seeing any statement in their defense. But, yeah, I'm just telling you, folks. Right? Look at what the World Socialist website said against Rage Against the War Machine. Oh, and I think they've even talked about us, too. Right? I believe they have. WSWS, Center for Political Innovation. They've targeted us, too. All right? I think, yep, we got targeted. Right? Here is my honorable mention. I've been honorably mentioned on the World Socialist website. I'm sure they're praising me for all my work defending socialism and anti-imperialism. I'm sure that they're celebrating the fact that we did that. No. The Center for Political Innovation, which is run by RT correspondent Caleb Maupin, was one of the sponsors of the Rage Rally. After the rally, somebody was photographed in the back of the room. You know, I mean, this is ridiculous that somebody was in the back of the room at our rally, and that makes me responsible for their views. Somebody who shouldn't have been there was in the back of the room at our Rage Against the War Machine reception. One guy was in the back of the room handing out leaflets that said they were anti-racist, etc. And, you know, he's basically calling us Nazis, right? The World Socialist website smears our organization as Nazis because there were some people that shouldn't have been there in the back of the room. And, you know, I mean, you can read it. I'm not even going to say people's names and all of that. You can go read it for yourself. I'm not going to highlight it. But based on the fact that there was a guy in the back of the room at our event, David North has basically accused the Center for Political Innovation of being Nazis. I'm telling you. But guys, I don't want you to misinterpret what I'm saying here. Okay. I don't want you to take this, and I think David North believes in everything he's doing. I don't think he calls up the government to get orders. I think David North believes every word that he says. But David North is a traitor. That's the point. I think Khrushchev believed every word he said, but Khrushchev was a traitor. And the point isn't that these are bad people. The point isn't that these people, you know, no. The point is the result of their actions benefits imperialism and weakens our movement. Khrushchev hated Stalin. Khrushchev really wanted to secure his own position in the Soviet Union. But he took actions that weakened the global communist movement and ultimately set the stage for the fall of the Soviet Union and huge defeats. Right? I'm sure that Jerry Healey's secretary was very hurt by whatever went on between them. And it's very possible that Jerry Healey was a slime ball. It's very possible that Jerry Healey was not a good man when it came to how he treated women. That I am not ruling out the possibility that Jerry Healey acted very improperly. He clearly wasn't a rapist, but is it possible he acted very improperly? Yes. But was David North selling out Jerry Healey? Something that benefited the global communist movement? Did that help the Palestinians in any way? You know, I see David North's going around giving speeches about Palestine now. Someone should say, hey, David, if you care about the Palestinians so much, why did you tear apart the biggest pro-Palestine organization in Britain in the 1980s? Why did you destroy the reputation of Vanessa Redgrave, the most outspoken pro-Palestine Hollywood actress? You know, I mean, he says he cares about the Palestinians. David North pretty much destroyed, for his own self-serving reasons, even though he knew the allegations were bullshit, he destroyed one of the biggest organizations that was defending the Palestinians in Britain for his own self-gain. Right? And why do you think he's attacking the Rage Against the War Machine rally? Why do you think he went after Jimmy Dore? Right? There's a problem in our movement. When people act short-sightedly, when people project their own frustrations, their own personal disagreements, and they're not able to see the big picture and understand the big picture, when they make it about their own personal whatever, when their understanding of world events and what's happening in the world gets muted, and they instead focus on how I've been unfairly treated and my individual, how I've been unfairly treated. When that becomes the focus, people are able to justify doing atrocious things. You have to keep the big picture in mind. You have to keep the big picture in mind. It's not easy. It's not easy. You're on the list. It is not easy to keep the big picture in mind. Khrushchev did what he did because it was about him. It would advance him to do what he did. It would weaken the image of his predecessor. Right? David North did what he did because it would advance him. But what David North has done hurt our movement. What Khrushchev did hurt our movement. This is the problem. This is the problem, and this is what traitors always do, is they find a way that their own personal vendetta is bigger than the cause. Right? Their own feeling of being slighted is way more important than the Palestinians who are dying. Their own feeling of being hurt is way more important than stopping World War III. The fact they want everyone to understand that they suffered, and the big picture becomes irrelevant. And that is what every traitor, from Leon Trotsky to David North to Khrushchev, that's what they always think. Is they think, well, yes, what I'm going to do is going to hurt the global movement. Yes, what I do is going to hurt anti-imperialism, is going to hurt a lot of people. But you know what? My anger, my resentment is more important than that. I am angry about whatever. What they're angry about might be justified. I'm telling you, there's no way Stalin was Stalin and didn't hurt a lot of people. Stalin clearly did hurt a lot of people. Right? Because everything that we're told about Stalin is so over the top and hostile to Stalin, I generally try to give Stalin the benefit of the doubt. But I don't know. I don't know for a fact. I do know there were a lot of people who ended up in gulags who didn't belong there. I know there were a lot of people who got executed who shouldn't have been executed. Everybody from the most pro-Stalin defender onward says that 1937 was not a good year in the Soviet Union. A lot of people got hurt. I try to give Stalin the benefit of the doubt because we're told so many lies about Stalin. All of his achievements are glossed over. So, but is it possible Stalin, in multiple situations, was genuinely in the wrong and genuinely hurt people? Yes, absolutely. Does that make what Khrushchev did okay? No. Right? Again, is it possible that Jerry Healey, I mean, it looks like he clearly used poor judgment at the least, right? Jerry Healey, at the minimum, I mean, some of the stuff, I mean, I don't know the details of what actually went on. He wasn't a rapist, but, in terms of self-control, he was, having a little too much fun, let me say, in his organization. Okay. He was having a little too much sex, but was that worth destroying his whole organization? Was that worth destroying the biggest socialist group in Britain that was pro-Palestine? Of course not. Right? And this is what you have to understand. Is traitors always find a way in their mind to say that their own personal situation, their own jealousy, their own resentment is somehow more important than the big picture. And that is something you have to actively fight against if you are going to be part of this movement. And it's not easy. It's not easy. I struggle with it as well. Right? There are people that there are people that I have shaken hands with in the past year that I would like to punch in the face, but I don't, because I know that our movement needs me to cooperate with them and needs me to work with them. There are people who have done me dirty that I will walk into the same room with and shake hands and be nothing but polite to, because that's what our movement needs. And I'm not perfect. And I struggle with this too. And I need to learn to get over my grudges. I need to learn to forgive people. I need to learn that it's not all about me. And all of us do. And in our age, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to do because it is all about you, your Facebook, your Twitter account, your YouTube channel, it's all about how your individual brand is so important. And that's why social media is social media is designed to breed traitors. Social media is perfect for traitors because you're competing with every other individual on social media. And that's why I want to get off social media. Right? I mean, my goal is to eventually not run my own social media, not run personal social media. I would like these streams to eventually be only for CPI members. So a way to keep in touch with the membership. I would like to eventually just have a YouTube channel for CPI that has speeches on it and take this channel, make it private so only CPI members can watch it. Right? I would like to not have a Twitter anymore. I'd like to not have a Facebook anymore. I'd like to just have an organization. That's what I'd like. I'd like to give speeches to my members or at public events. I'd like to write books that people can read, but I'd like to be completely off social media. That is my goal. Because if I'm going to run a revolutionary organization that accomplishes its goals, I can't be corrupted by the narcissism that is peddled by social media. Social media is a corrupting influence. It's a corrupting influence. And it breeds the mindset that leads to traitors because it makes you a competitor. Everyone on social media is a competitor with everybody else. Right? And I think of Peter Coffin and I, we're good friends. And part of what holds Peter coffin and I together is we've both been betrayed so many times. We've had so many people betray us over the years. So many people stab us in the back for no good reason. Right? And Peter Coffin and I both, there's just an innate goodness. We don't treat people like that. We've both been through a lot and we've disagreed and stuff, but we are both committed to doing the work that we do. Peter loves the work that he does. I love the work that I do. We make a good team. Right? And there's other people who I work with over the years who have withstood this. But social media is not good for relationships. It hurts families. Social media tears apart families. Social media tears apart communities. It incites people, it incites people against each other. And my goal is for CPI to not be a social media organization. My goal is for CPI to be a group that is so good at recruiting in real life and recruiting people who would never go looking for us, people who would never even dream of looking for what we're about. Recruiting those folks and recruiting in a way that doesn't rely on the algorithms, that we never have to get on social media. And I think if we can do that, we will be a much healthier organization. That's what I think we will be. But I just wanted to share all of this with you. We're getting close to 2 hours now, so I should probably start answering people's super chats and stuff like that. But I just wanted to share these anecdotes with you all because we're building an organization, CPI. And I guess since I didn't give it much attention in the opening, I'll give it attention now. Yeah, it's very exciting. It is very, very exciting that, okay. I got to bring the poster up once again. Hold on. We are having a convention, our national convention, December 2nd. The Center for Political Innovation is having our national convention on December 2nd. And I've given you all the speech many, many times. I just can't get over how awesome it's going to be. November 30th, we are having a pro-Palestine rally in Portland that's going to be our own style. And it's going to be with American flags. It's going to say money for America, jobs and schools, not for Israel. That's on November 30th. That's going to be awesome. December 1st, we are having an event with Jyoti Brar, leader of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, and she's going to give a great talk, and it's going to be a great talk at an event at a space in Portland. December 2nd, we are having our national convention Scott Ritter is going to be there. Joe T. Brar is going to be there. Garland Nixon's going to be there. David Rovics is going to be there. Lee Stranahan is going to be there. Craig Pasta Jardula, who's been hosting Jimmy Dore's show, is going to be there. Anti-War Oregon is going to be there. I mean, it is turning into, many of our own members are going to be there. Chris O'Lally from the Party of Communists is going to be there. Rainer Shea is going to be there. It is going to be a badass, absolutely badass event, December 2nd. Please register. Please register on Eventbrite, because we need to know how much food to get, right? I mean, we're trying to figure out different things, and we need to figure out food, right? We want to feed you all. That's kind of the idea. So, in the hopes that we can have a good lunch, we need to know how many people are coming. So please register. Please go ahead and register on the website. We've got almost 70 people already registered, but the room holds 250. We got to fill it up. So, please go ahead and register. That would be great. We got different registrations that are coming in. That's great. And please go ahead and register. And please donate, because we need funds to do the event. We're trying to figure out how to get our second cameraman there so that we can get, proper video production carried out, and we need support. So if you can send a contribution, you can send it over Give, Send, Go, or if you would like to send it in a less public way, you can go to just the CPI website and hit donate. There's a donate button on the CPI website that takes you to a Stripe account, and you can donate this way. You can also donate this way, but we need funds for our conference. You can also donate here, right? But we're raising money, and we're going to have a conference, and it's going to be a badass conference. That's December 2nd, right? But I'm not done yet. We're doing so much. This is going to be like well over 10 days of activity. So December 3rd, we are having a religious gathering for those who are religiously inclined, for, Christian folks that are sympathetic to CPI. That's happening on December 3rd. It's called You Are the Light of the World. Let me see if I can, do I have the, right? Do I have the image of that? Right. That's on December 3rd. That's going to be a really, really important event. Let me see if I have the image for that event. Okay. So we're doing that. That's December 3rd, the religious event. I thought I could swear I had the poster for it, but I will find the poster for it. Okay. Well, I don't have the poster for that, but we're having our December 3rd event. Then later in the week, we're going to have a rally to support the Uhuru movement at a federal building in Portland. We're going to unfurl a banner and have a little impromptu protest to support the Uhuru movement, say hands off Uhuru, drop the charges against Uhuru. Then we're going to have a public speaking workshop where our members will get to learn the art of public speaking, etc., so that we can improve our skills in that area. It'll be a great time to do that. Then December 8th, 9th, and 10th. All right, and I think I do have an image for this one, right? December 8th, 9th, and 10th. Yeah, I have an image for this one. December 8th, 9th, and 10th, we are going to do our introductory workshop for the Center for Political Innovation. It's our introductory workshop that we do, and that'll be in Oregon. We've got a space in Oregon, and it'll be great for new members, for people that are interested in learning what CPI is all about. We're having a weekend workshop, and that will be on December 8th, 9th, and 10th. It's Roadmap for America, an introduction to the city building tendency. We did it. We did it already in Missouri this summer, and it was a great smashing success. The workshop was amazing. We're going to do it again in Portland with local people there, with anyone who wants to come from around the country. We're going to do that December 8th, 9th, and 10th. So we've got early December in Portland is going to be 10 days, 12 days, really, of activity. We're getting a lot done. right? It is going to be a packed time. It is going to be a step forward for anti-imperialism. And our hope is that we will leave a functioning organization in our wake when we leave the city of Portland, that we will leave Portland with a well-established organization. We've already got our president, Elizabeth Young, there, who's amazing, doing great work, headed to Athens this week to represent us at an international conference in Greece. You know, we're hoping that by the time we leave Portland, Oregon, there will be a well-functioning anti-imperialist organization in that area. That is what we are aiming for. So, you know, please send us a donation if you can to help us do the event. That would be greatly, greatly appreciated. Please come. Please register to attend the event. Links down below. You know, we need you. We need you. So there you go. So now I will do the roll call where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations, and we find out who is on the other side of the camera. Names and locations, who is with us tonight? Names and locations, who is with us? Names and locations, who is with us? Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Anyone on the Rockfin? Oh my goodness, the Rockfin didn't even start. Goodness gracious. Okay, so we're on one outlet tonight. We're on YouTube tonight. All right. Keeping the Faith in Germany. Love Binghamton in New York. Karen Mendes in Germany. Shout out to you, Karen. Patch in Arizona. Neil Fraser in Hong Kong. Ryan in Kansas City. Bendigo, Australia. David Fox. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Mason in Morrisville, New York. Welcome, Mason. All right. We got Gonzalo, upstate. Jamie in St. Paul. Welcome. Patrick in Maine. Welcome, Patrick. Good to have you. Bob Troy in New York. Colin in Greensboro. Sue in Hollywood. Palo Alto, California. Welcome. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Mariah in North Carolina says, hugs to everyone. Best to you, Mariah. You're great. Alex from Brazil is with us. Shout out to all of our comrades out in Brazil. Welcome. Names and locations. Terry in the People's Republic of Portland. Very good. Terry has a great YouTube channel. Go subscribe to Terry's channel. She talks about all kinds of things. It's amusing. Last night she was talking about how the trend of fat stuff, right? I tuned in the other night and Terry was talking about how they're trying to say that fat is good for your health or something. It was interesting. Balthazar in Oakland. Welcome. Northern Michigan, a better America. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Welcome. All right. Gabby in Chicago. Fat stuff, says Terry. Very, very good. Gabby is great as well. Gabby hops on these streams. Very good stuff. Bruce Monroe in the Philippines. Welcome, Bruce. Bruce is in the Philippines. Welcome. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. All right. We got Briggy in Pennsylvania. Welcome, Briggy. We got Nicholas in St. Louis. Oh, you're in St. Louis. Okay. Very good. We got some good people. Timoshenko is out in St. Louis. We got a good crowd in St. Louis, right? Very, 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 very good. Fat is not good for you. And that is what Terry was saying on her stream. She was talking about this trend of saying fat is good for you among liberals. It doesn't make any sense. So I want to clarify. Got to clarify what these things are about. Right? Got to be clear about that. Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. Oh, names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Anybody else? If not, I will probably start answering super chats. But I've only got 3. And so before I start answering super chats, I am going to put on a song. I have played this song on these streams many times. The Fourth Dimension. I have played this song on these streams many, many times, but you can't play this song enough. And in light of what we're doing with the World Youth Festivals and all of that, this song, it was written by activists in the 1970s, communist activists who visited the People's Republic of China. And a central part of the song is a banner a banner that the Chinese communists displayed, which is apparently still there. I'll show you the banner. Here's, it used to be in the 70s on the Chinese border, and I think they still have it, that they displayed this banner, right? Right? And this banner, long live the great unity of the people of the world. And that's a slogan that really kind of encompasses the spirit of the World Youth Festivals, the spirit of the global communist movement, the spirit that I get from being in CPI. We are anti-imperialism, we're pro-development, and long live the great unity of the people of the world. That is very much what we're about, right? Against imperialism, for bringing the world together with development and trade. So yeah, on that note, yes, the friendship of the world. So on that note, I am going to put on this song. And if anyone has any more super chats, send them in. And if not, then from there, I will just answer people's super chats and I will end. But I just want to answer people's super chats before I go. That's basically what I will do. Right, is answer people's super chats. So is this? Yeah. All right. Oh, okay. Here it is. All right. Hold on. All right. Here's the song.
Got to the border, we began to walk on the two flags flying over the bridge we were to cross. One was the bloody British rag of imperialism, casting its shadow over poverty, starvation, vicious exploitation in Hong Kong. The other was the flaming red flag of revolution and socialism, telling us all, the people of the world, the time has come to come along. This ain't just any old border that we are standing on. It stands between two systems, one died, one young and strong. And then we crossed that bridge into China, saw a great banner up ahead. Its meaning set my heart a pounding, and this is what that banner is. Long live the great unity of the peoples of the world. Long live the great unity of the peoples of the world. Went to a steel mill, saw people working hard, but there were no bosses. The workers ran the job. They worked 10 hours, 6 days a week, on great machines built by their own hand. They labored not for some rich man's profits, but to meet the needs of people of the land. And they are building with such a spirit of revolution and socialism, for they are masters of their own future. The working class is in command. Talked with an older worker. He said many worries are gone. If one is sick or injured, they are provided for. We have no fear of rising prices, no unemployment will you find. There's always more to be done to build China, not just for us but to free mankind. Shanghai, where before it was free, dope and prostitution and starving people filled the streets. And now these people stand up united, providing for the needs of all. Decent housing, health care, education, they decide now they are the law. And man, I felt so damn proud of China, of revolution and socialism. Just look at what our class has accomplished. Just look at what the struggle has won. We talked with men and women, now working side by side, about our many struggles for freedom so long denied. They said, comrades, China is with you. This is your country as well as ours. The struggles of the people united will be triumphant. We have the power. Long live the great unity, yeah, of the peoples of the world. Long live the great unity, yeah, of the peoples of the world. No, I missed my family, wish they were there with me. I knew they're back home struggling to change society. And I admit I hated to leave China. You know that freedom kinda grows on you. But now I feel such deep determination to do the job we all have to do. Remember, people, our day's coming. Make revolution, build socialism, to do away with class exploitation, to end oppression once and for all. And I have learned a lesson that I will always heed. The fight to end oppression, the working class must lead. But we will build us up a great movement to sweep away the system we're in. And nothing gonna stop us from doing it. We will fight and we will win. Long live the people, long live working class rule. Long live the people, long live working class rule.
Yes. Long live the great unity of the people of the world. I cannot listen to that song too many times. I just cannot listen to that song too many times. Long live the great unity of the people of the world. I think there's another similar looking banner. Right. That song really kind of encompasses the spirit of what CPI is about. That's the communism that we're going for, not the woke left, not Trotskyism, not burn it down, tear it down. We are about raising the people up out of poverty. We are about the Belt and Road Initiative, the Eurasian Economic Union. We are about the Donetsk People's Republic. We are about the long live the great unity of the people of the world. That's what we are about. So, and that's what I get from the World Youth Festivals. Every time I hear that song, I think of the World Youth Festivals and the communist youth, thousands of them gathered to stand against imperialism, the city building tendency. Yeah, that's the communism I believe in, and I think a lot of the people in the United States who hate communism because they hate woke people, if they knew about this kind of communism, they knew about the city building tendency, they would obviously see things differently. So on that note, I've got 3 super chat questions to answer. Nice shirt, Caleb, says Gala. Well, thank you, Gala. It's Fidel Castro. I got this shirt in Ecuador at the Quito, Ecuador at the World Youth Festival. And someone once said to me that actually this shirt, it's a better political statement to wear this shirt than it is to wear a Che Guevara shirt, because Che Guevara is dead. And there's many people who say, well, Che was the real revolutionary, Fidel was the sellout, or Che was a Trotskyist, or Che, Che Guevara, there's Che Guevara t-shirts everywhere, and Che died. And a lot of people project onto Che Guevara stuff that is not necessarily true because he died. But Fidel, he built a socialist country. He had an anti-imperialist line his whole life. He changed his position on the LGBT question, right? Fidel was very anti-gay in the 60s and 70s, but then he apologized for it and became very pro-LGBT in his final years. Fidel Castro converted to Christianity, right? Which, he was an atheist, a very strong atheist who persecuted Christians. But Fidel in the 1990s, he realized that Christianity and the Bible is essential to what he believed, and he repented. And he met with the Pope, and he met with Russian Orthodox clergy, and he became friendly to religion once again. And he wrote in his autobiography that he is a Christian. Fidel Castro is a very, very admirable leader. I have a lot of admiration for Fidel Castro. And in his final years, I'll put it on the screen. One of the best things we did, one of the books that we published, and Amazon really didn't want us to publish it. They really tried hard to prevent us from publishing this. We had to use a loophole in the Amazon rules to get them to let us publish it. But we published a book by Fidel Castro. And it's very, we don't have as many copies of it as our other books because Amazon was not kind to us, and it's frustrating, but it's a good book that we published. Fidel Castro exposes the synthetic left. We published this book, and I will put it on the screen if I can get an image of the cover. Okay, we'll put it on the screen here. Where Fidel Castro, in the final years of his life, when he retired, he wrote his columns in the Cuban daily newspaper, and he warned about the synthetic left. Right? It was like he his final columns. This is our book, Fidel Castro Exposes the Synthetic Left. It's on Amazon. He in his final years, he exposed, the synthetic left, and he exposed, drugs, and he exposed the CIA manipulation of Trotskyism and all of this. In his final years, his final columns were all about how, Obama was a result of the synthetic left. It was really, really great. And, we published Fidel Castro Exposes the Synthetic Left because we wanted to preserve it. And what's really amusing is that when Fidel Castro in 2010, when he, went on his rant, and wrote his columns exposing the synthetic left, and exposing drug use as being a CIA operation, and exposing the hippie counterculture as being anti-communist. When he did that, it's really wild. It's really, really wild. When he did that, the Party of Socialism and Liberation denounced him. Right? They denounced him for doing it, and they said he was spreading Larouchian conspiracy theories. So, one of the things we decided we had to do as CPI is we had to republish those columns, not let it be forgotten that Fidel Castro exposed the synthetic left. But yeah, it's really, really unbelievable. The Party of Socialism and Liberation denounced Fidel Castro for spreading conspiracism, they called it. It was just unbelievable to me. Yeah. So, I'll find you I've dug up the link before. It's here it is. Yeah. September 1st, 2010. Daniel Estulin and the phony Bilderberg conspiracy. And the PSL wrote a hit piece on Fidel, right? They claim to be such a pro-Cuba party. PSL denounces Fidel Castro for exposing the synthetic left. And yeah, in 2010, the PSL decided to attack Cuba and attack Fidel Castro. It's still on their website, liberationschool.org. PSL denounces Fidel Castro for exposing the synthetic left. They published this article denouncing Fidel Castro for promoting the writings of Daniel Estulin, for talking about the Tavistock Institute, for talking about how Beatles music is hypnotic and manipulative, for talking about the Trilateral Commission. It's really unbelievable. Go and read it. I mean, it's like, who are you going to listen to? Some tiny group in America that has protests, or the leader of the fucking Cuban government, right? Who are you going to listen to, right? The fact that Fidel Castro, said what he said and that PSL denounces them, that's an argument against PSL. That's not an argument against Fidel Castro, right? And that, when Fidel Castro spoke the truth about how the drug culture is a CIA creation and all of that, PSL did a hit piece on him. So we did the opposite, right? Because our organization, we are the anti-PSL, right? That's kind of what CPI is. We are the anti-PSL, right? We are out of the movement to the masses. PSL's goal is to be the stage managers of the movement, and our goal is to get out of the movement and to the masses, right? We decided we were going to publish Fidel Castro Exposes the Synthetic Left. So yeah, I have huge admiration for Fidel Castro. The man, the man embraced Jesus Christ and became a Christian. The man realized he was wrong and how he was treating LGBT people and apologized for it. The man was consistent, always consistently anti-imperialist, always standing in solidarity. He was with the people of South Africa against apartheid. He was with the Palestinians against Zionism. He was with the IRA. He was a good friend of Gaddafi. I mean, Fidel Castro, I like him. So wearing a Fidel shirt, I would argue, is more revolutionary than wearing a Che shirt, because Che died. And there's a lot of people who aren't so good who like to use Che Guevara and say, oh, if only Che Guevara had taken over, blah, 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 blah. Well, if you wear a Fidel shirt, and I did wear this shirt, I did an interview on the 90th anniversary of Lenin's death on RT. Before I worked at RT, I was just a guest, didn't get paid a cent to do it. I went to the RT studio, and in this shirt, and I wore a blue like shirt, with a collar around it, I gave an interview, and I wore a Fidel Castro t-shirt, and I've had this shirt for quite some time. And yeah, there you go. There you go. Glad you like it, Gala. Glad you like it. And Gala also says Jimmy Dore should speak on December 2nd. I agree, Gala. I agree that Jimmy Dore should speak. Jimmy Dore's on tour, though. That guy speaks at his own events, and he's touring around the country for his own shows. So I don't think it would be possible. But, I'll talk to Pasta. He's been hosting Jimmy Dore's show. And, who knows? Jimmy Dore and I have talked. I've gone on the Jimmy Dore show. Jimmy Dore had me on to talk about my book, Bread Tube Serves Imperialism. It was a great experience. I really enjoyed going on the show. And who knows, right? Jimmy Dore would be welcome to come to any conference that CPI did. We love Jimmy Dore. He's a good guy. He's a great guy. Jimmy Dore is awesome. And he's been nothing but friendly to me. He reached out to me. When we were having some hardship last August, he reached out to me. He gave me a personal phone call so that we could compare notes and talk about things. He was so supportive. He didn't have to do that. That guy's a busy guy, but he reached out to me and gave me a supportive phone call. Jimmy Dore is a good man, a very, very good man. Nothing but admiration for Jimmy Dore, no matter what political differences might develop. And, one thing I admire about Jimmy Dore, I'm not going to say names, but recently, I heard about this. I was not watching the show that day, but recently there was somebody who Jimmy Dore had on as a guest, and there was somebody else who is like a social media personality who doesn't like that person. And that person who didn't like the guest sent a super chat in criticizing the guest, and Jimmy Dore, I think one of his guests or one of his co-hosts started to go in on on the person who sent the super chat in, and Jimmy Dore just cut it off right there. He said, nope, we're not going to do this. Jimmy Dore is good about that. He understands the importance of maintaining relationships and not having everything split, not having everyone denounce everybody else over internet bullshit. You know what I'm saying? And that's good. There's probably a lot of people Jimmy Dore is friendly with that don't like me, and and that's fine. And I'm glad. That's what we need. We need a network of anti-imperialist folks. That's what we need. We need a network of anti-imperialist folks. Jimmy Dore is a very committed anti-imperialist, and there are people that he's friends with, that are not friendly to each other, but he understands the importance of maintaining those alliances and friendships. And that I really admire about Jimmy Dore. Oh, another super chat came in. So there we go. Khrushchev went wild. Okay. Well, so first thing. So Battle Cossack says, Mom and I, so you're referring to your mother, and I had a talk about how people don't seem to care about the feelings of the majority. I brought that up because of this individualism. Okay, well, it's good that you can have reflective conversations like that with your mother. People's relationships with their parents vary. Not everyone has the kind of relationship where they could have that kind of conversation with their parents, but I'm glad that you do. That's a good thing. And you're right that you have to sometimes keep the big picture in mind. Right? You have to sometimes keep the big picture in mind and not make it about your individual direct experience, because look, there's a lot of times that people will do bad things or whatever. One thing I've been trying to reinforce to people is that when one of us gets smeared big time, it hurts all of us. I'm just telling you the truth. There are certain certain social media personalities who say similar things to me, right? Who don't like me. I don't like them. We've fought or whatever. But if one of them was getting smeared, had their reputation destroyed, that would hurt us because we say the same thing. And the masses of people. I've been trying to tell people this, and it's a hard thing for us to remember. This is a really, really hard thing for people to remember. We all look the same to most people. All right. And it sucks. Average people do not know the difference between the CPI and the PSL and the RCP and the CPUSA and the PCUSA and the Trotskyites. We all look the same. I'm just being real with you. To people that are not in this bubble, we all look the same. Right? Brian Becker and me and David North and Jimmy Dore and Max Blumenthal and Abby Martin, we all look the same. To people that aren't part of our universe, we are all the same. And that's a hard thing to realize, but it's true. To the mainstream, all of us are the same. And when one of us is getting our name run through the mud, the masses of the people don't think, well, that guy is bad, or that girl is bad, or that person's bad. What they think is people with anti-imperialist views are bad. That's what they think. People that are against the USA bombing Gaza or the USA backing Israel are bad. People that support Russia are bad. That's what they think. Right? Ben Norton. True, too. Ben and I don't like each other, but if most people can't tell the difference between Ben and I. To most average people, Ben and I are both dudes who don't agree with U.S. foreign policy and support Russia and China. So if Ben was getting smeared, that would hurt us to the masses. In our bubble, it doesn't hurt us, okay? But to the masses of people, it hurts us. And look, if a labor union, right? Great example. If a labor union gets exposed as engaging in corruption, gets dragged before Congress, if you're a rival labor union, you might say, oh, that's a good thing. But to average people who are watching the TV, what do they hear? Unions are corrupt. That's what they hear, right? If an anti-war activist, right, gets their name dragged through the mud, right? If they're a rival anti-war activist, you might say, good, that guy deserves it. But to average people that are flipping through the channels, they say anti-war activists are bad, right? And if we're aiming for the big picture, and this is really important, if we're aiming for the big picture, if we're not aiming for our own short-term gain, if we're thinking for the big picture, if we want to really take power, if we want to really stop wars, if we want to really have influence and get shit done, we got to think about the big picture. And in the big picture, you know, if something happens to somebody who's in the same niche category as you, that hurts you. To the big picture, might help you gain in your bubble, but in the big picture, that hurts you. You know, Neil Fraser gets it, right? And this is something a lot of people forget. And again, social media is so good at helping people forget this, right? That people get caught up in their own rivalries and but you get into your little bubble and you forget this. But to the broad masses of people, right? If somebody who is similar to you and has similar views to you is seen in a negative light, that hurts you. Something to think about. Something to think about. All righty. Khrushchev went wild, expanding, staying Stalin's cult of personality. Stalin stopped him. Oh, right. Khrushchev then sold out and admitted later that in life that he lied. You could convince Stalin to your position. Well, that's interesting. Now, I know about how many people pointed out that Khrushchev was Stalin's golden boy, that Stalin was frequently trying to restrain Khrushchev from expanding the cult of personality, and that Khrushchev was a kiss ass, right, to Stalin. Many people have pointed that out. Many people have also pointed out that Khrushchev did apparently vote in favor of Trotsky at one point, which was like kind of a stain on his record. And so he may have been on the defensive because of that. But this I have not heard, that he admitted he lied later in life. There was a book that was a bestseller that was published during the 1960s, right? Because so Khrushchev was removed by Kosygin and Brezhnev, right? He was eventually ousted, right? I believe it was in 1964. Right? Wasn't Khrushchev ousted? He was ousted by Kosygin and Brezhnev in 1964, and he was placed in house arrest. Because he was just such a bad, incompetent leader. And Kosygin and Brezhnev took power. And in the 60s, there was a book that was published in the United States called Khrushchev Remembers. But that book was full of anti-Stalin lies, in my understanding. But maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, my understanding is that he was ousted, right? Wasn't he ousted in March 1964, Leonid Brezhnev began plotting Khrushchev's removal of power. Yeah, he was ousted. And I believe he was, he was forced to kind of live in house arrest for the rest of his life. So. Yeah, that the Soviet government constantly denounced him because his leadership in the Soviet Union was actually quite short, 1956 to 1964. But he ruined their relationship with China. He created so many problems during those years. So many problems during those years that the Soviet leadership ousted him. But the Soviet leadership didn't really go. There was in like the early 70s, an attempt by Brezhnev to kind of shift back to some of the policies of Stalin, but it wasn't complete. And Soviet foreign policy really, after the ouster of Khrushchev in 1964, it still continued. It was still, Soviet foreign policy didn't really shift until after Czechoslovakia, right? 1968, Prague Spring was kind of a wake-up call to the Soviet bureaucracy. And then when China really went into the American camp, they realized, oh shit, we need to, maintain our relationship with these anti-imperialist countries. They escalated their support for Cuba and for African countries. There was kind of a left swing in the Soviet government policies in the 70s. But there you go. There you go. Thank you, Piha. All right. Well, I guess on that note, I'm going to put on the closing music, but I'll be back probably tomorrow. If not tomorrow, the next day. I will be in San Francisco pretty soon for the APEC summit. Xi Jinping is coming to America. Very honored to cover the APEC summit. So wish me luck. Surge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.